So some of you Ducati guys were screaming at your screens, and there's something that I missed, and I kind of feel like an idiot for it because I've done this countless times before. Shouldn't have been something that I forgot. When doing the brakes, specifically the rear brakes, if you don't bleed your caliper upside down, you won't get all of the air out of the ABS system. So, I have the pleasure of going through all of this again really quick and re-bleeding my rear. But unfortunately, to do that, I have to take the rear tire off again, which means all of these stages. But I'm going to give you guys a real-time view of how long this actually takes. When I'm not explaining too much, because you guys have seen this before. Alright, exhaust is off. Set to safe spot. And this time I'm going to bank on being able to break my tire loose with the snap-on impact. So I'm just going to skip putting it on the ground. And just go straight for it. So, pipple stand goes in, there we go. Bike gets leaned, step on pipple stand, making sure that both wheels are touching the ground. And let's see if this impact has enough to break 200 foot-pounds loose. Of course it does, it's snap-on. For all of you guys out there who will hate on Snap-on for their high prices on everything, you get what you pay for. Again, being very careful not to lose any of that stuff. This time I'm actually leaving the collar inside of the rim. And right now I'm kind of at the mercy of my luck in not having this bike decide to belly flop onto my hand. So on this lower caliper bolt, there's not really enough room for a full-size ratchet to get in there, so you have to use these stubby little things. If memory serves, this is an 8mm, and it is. So with an 8mm and it being quarter drive, a lot more room to get in here. That one's loose, and that one's loose. So now, just taking these bolts out. And what ultimately took me, I'd say I probably sat there and tried to bleed the brakes for 45 minutes to an hour, 3 or 4 different times. And I knew there was something that I was missing. I just didn't really remember having to do all this crap before, so my bad. Now we have zip ties that I placed some time ago apparently. So I am going to be editing out the process of me searching for tools, but I will let you guys know I am at 10 minutes and 46 seconds, and I had to run inside and run upstairs a few different times to grab different tools from my track bag. So being very careful not to cut our brake line, because that would be very expensive to fuck up. This is a 3mm. nailed it. So this comes off, and you guys do not try this without taking your brake lines off. A lot of people, and apparently myself included last time, think that these brake lines just stem from the master cylinder. They don't. They go from the master cylinder all the way up into the bike to the ABS pump, all the way back down through the side of the swing arm to these hard lines hidden under that channel, and then to the brakes. So the reason I could never get them bled was just simply the fact that the bleed nipple is on the bottom and it needs to be up for air to escape. So you never actually fully get your brakes completely bled, which is why I wasn't building pedal pressure. So I don't know if it's actually the proper way to do it, as far as like if a Ducati tech was here, but this is the way that I do it, is I take the caliper, swing it 180 degrees like that, and get my pads back in place, just like that. Because if you tried to just slide the caliper up and over, it's not going to have enough room. So now you can see our bleed bolt is on the top, and the bleed bolt is an 11 millimeter, or whatever the US equivalent of that would be. I'm at 15 minutes 20 seconds right now, and I'm not trying to hurry. Just again letting you guys know realistic time as to how long this actually takes. But well, if your tools were actually in the right spot, which if you're anything like me is definitely never the case, it would take considerably less time. Because I have the fancy Ducati billet cap, I actually have to crack these guys loose in order to be able to break my cap open. I know I'm covering everything, but chances are this doesn't apply to you anyways. Okay, so it's loose. And get this up and over everything else so it kind of hangs out. One tip is never try and just crank on your cap, because you will break your bleed nipple off. You want to make sure that you can get a hold of the entire thing. Like that. I was kind of on the fence as to whether that was going to break just then or not. So, my cap off, my reservoir is open, and it's stable enough to pour fluid in there, and I have fluid at the ready behind the camera. I don't know if this is better with or without the light, but I'm leaving the light off from here on out. So I have my way overly full oil drain pan just below, and I think out of frame. And you guys are gonna notice so you'll notice that I get complete squishiness, and now it's starting to build pressure. So that's what it was doing when I was riding. Couldn't for the life of me figure out why. But again, it was one of those things that I overlooked because, well, we all have our moments, right? Alright, so pumping on the pedal. Tons of air. Tons and tons of air. Okay, so pumping on the pedal, holding the pedal down, break it loose, and just air came out. Pump, 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 break it loose, just air. Keeping an eye on our fluid reservoir, which is already almost empty. You're going to go through fluid, a lot more fluid I should say, doing this, because you are not just bleeding the reservoir, you're bleeding an entire ABS system. So I'm holding as firm as I can with my hand on the brake lever, pump, 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 tons of air, pump, 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 tons of air. We're going to keep doing this until we get a steady stream. You want that caliper to be as vertical as possible. Would I just crack off? Oh. Okay, just a zip tie, nothing to worry about. Or so that was just the remnants of a zip tie, nothing to worry about. So pump, 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 pump. Actually starting to get some fluid now. This time I'm really pushing and holding. And pumping like crazy. Breaking loose, pumping like crazy. Alright. Already refilling that reservoir. So now straight off the bat I can feel immediate tension. Usually if I would let the pedal be idle without pumping for 20 or 30 seconds, it would go straight all the way down. So we're definitely on the right path here. Pedal's starting to feel very, very firm. And holding down. And how much you bleed after you start building consistent and hard pressure is completely up to you. If I'm doing this, I kind of want to run fluid through the entire system so I have fresh fluid. So this would look different if it was up vertically, and actually I'm just going to do it for fun. No, I'm not. That would be a big mess. So if this hose was being held up vertically, you guys would see a steady stream of just fluid coming out, but right now you're just kind of seeing it dribble through half of this tube. That's just because there's nothing on the end of this tube. So I can feel when air bubbles are passing through, and there's none left. Pumping this through again. Another thing that I'm doing too is watching my reservoir. You can see as I'm pumping, little blips are coming out, but those blips aren't bubbles. Oh, there was a tiny little one. Okay, so I just broke it loose and let fluid out. Now, yep, tiny little bit of air is coming out. I'm going to keep doing this until it stops from this side as well. There we go. No more air. And one last time. No air. Sweet. Okay. So those little blips that you're seeing are just fluid that's coming back into the reservoir. So now I'm actually locking down my bleeder. So my bleeder's locked down. Take my little hose off. Move my oil pan out of the way, because I guarantee you I would have stepped on it or in it. It's just kind of how I roll. Now, before we do anything else, we're going to top the rest of the reservoir off. And that's going to be too much. You're going to notice as I'm putting my cap back in that it's going to overflow. Maybe it's not going to do me dirty. But the way that I actually like to do this is I will take, yeah, I'm gonna do it this way. So the way that I like to do this to make sure that I'm actually sealing everything is I'll take the actual diaphragm off of the inside of the cap and just make sure that that gasket seals the whole way around. So now it's over its max mark, but I mean, eventually as the bike starts consuming more of the ABS fluid and it starts cycling through the ABS system a little bit better, that level will actually drop. Doesn't mean that you're losing fluid or that you had air in there. It just means that lines are expanding, and as they expand, there's more volume to fill as things get hot. So one thing to think about when it comes to ABS bikes, and one of the things that I hate about them, and to be honest, if I had it my way, none of my bikes would have ABS on them. But if you think about a car, if you're sitting in your car with your ignition off and you start pumping on your brakes, you get maybe 1 or 2 pumps before that thing's hard as a rock. So when I'm pumping the brakes here on a stand with the bike off, it's going to feel a little bit different than when the bike's on. The ABS unit is cycling fluid through its little reservoir and different channels. It's kind of like a really small over-glorified automatic transmission, essentially. Different valves and checkpoints, essentially, that allow fluid to go certain ways and don't allow it to go other ways. I'm not the smartest when it comes to brake stuff, but that is essentially how it works. All right, back to the rear caliper. Putting our cap on, and I'm going to give this caliper a very healthy dose of brake clean once I get it flipped back around. And I'm making sure too that I'm not putting my caliper, or my pads I should say, on anything that's actually wet, because your brake pads will absorb brake fluid, and if it does, then you either have to rely on burning them out, or you just have, you know, really bad quality braking. Back to the rear caliper, locking these back down. Rear caliper bolts are tightened up. Everything's been blasted with brake clean. Now we have this 3mm bolt that needs to go back in that held our line in place. And I'm going to tell you guys a secret. If you look at the orientation of these lines and see how snug they are to the chassis, there's honestly, in my opinion, no reason to add zip ties to them, because they can't move from where they are, and zip ties are just kind of extraneous at this point. Just my opinion. If you want to put them in there, go ahead. So the manual tells you to, but I personally don't, or I'm not going to this time. I did last time, obviously, because I cut them off. But after cutting them off and looking at it, it's like, I can see why it's kind of extraneous and not really necessary. So getting all my shit out of the way, I have my brass washer, and this is all still very, very clean axle lube. So I really only need to concern myself with my actual brass washer. And the other thing is making sure I'm not touching my tire with my greasy hands, because the rubber will absorb all of your nasty greasiness. You also don't want your tire laying in a big ass puddle of brake clean. So doing this the easy way, I was showing you guys the very proper way the first time because, well, you know, Ducati. This is the way that I actually do it. This is my fully truthful, unscripted way of doing it. So I don't actually do the hand taps like I was doing in real life. If you look at the design of this collar and the way that it pushes itself in, there's no way that it's going to tighten down unevenly. So at this point, I just have to figure out where the hell I put the nut. All right, you guys, I would say this is 3/4 of the amount of time that I've taken for this video is me looking for shit that I just had in my hand. And honestly, 95% of the time that I'm working on cars as well. This is what I've resorted to, watching security camera footage of where the hell I put my nut. Watch what happens as I get up and walk past. That was me kicking the nut. So, if we get up and look, oh fuck, there it is. Over here, God, Okay, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Let's clean all the crap off of this. Threads are completely clean. I mean, they're covered in grease, but there's no debris left in it. So again, the way that I do this in real life, and my tire hasn't flown off and I haven't died yet, is I will literally just get this hand tight, push one side, push the other side, and that's good enough. Now, okay, so that's cranked onto there, and visually, looking at my tire, it's not wobbling. That's good enough for me. So now exhaust goes back on. Don't know if I'm in frame or not, but you guys have seen it come off. It's the opposite of, you know, taking it off. This goes through, it goes through there. And wash that exhaust down. And something I didn't show in my last video was, you guys see this line right here? It's a little bit darker. So watch what happens when I put, so my spring goes back on. Ooh, do not like it when my bike rolls. Okay, spring goes back on, and if you just tap and wiggle on your exhaust, you see it pulling itself together. Just like that. That's how you properly align an exhaust. And the spring's tight enough to actually make a sound. It's usually good enough for me. And back to the rear of the bike. Making sure we're not being stupid. Rear tire is on. Realistically, that's kind of all that matters at this point. As I lift and get ready for the bike to come back down, it didn't happen that time, but usually what I do is I put my foot on the left peg and I'm pulling the bike towards me, so when it settles itself back on the ground, it goes directly into the side stand and you don't have to worry about your bike falling over. Everyone online says one thing and my manual says something else. Alright, some people are saying 230 Newton meters. Some are saying 270. I'm gonna go to 230 and see what happens. Well, hopefully nothing happens. Don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it, but it's around 170 foot-pounds. Okay? So if you can't get your clip through, as I said in the last video, always go tighter, never go looser. So you start your clip like this, and then spread it apart, but not enough to actually bend it. Snap it in place like that. I'll annotate how long this actually took, but I'm gonna guess maybe 15 minutes of actual wrenching. And now for the moment of truth, I'm expecting maybe a little bit of squish on the first couple of pumps. Oh, none. Super solid, very progressive. I would say that's about 40 pounds of force. So actually sitting on the bike, oh yeah, just sitting on the bike. This is about the hardest that I would ever brake. If I wanted to lock the tire, I would be down about here. Which on this bike, again, it's pretty hard to do. So if you couldn't ever get your system to bleed and your rear brake was taking forever to build pressure, or none at all in my case, this is your problem, this is your solution. Don't do as I did.